Got it. Yes, video. Yes, microphone. Okay. Excellent. All right, so we were just starting to talk about inflammaging. We've got a bunch of stats going on about why aging is scary. And inflammaging is when you have long-term, low-level, insidious, chronic inflammation that keeps your immune system fighting indefinitely. Aging and inflammation are natural processes. They occur simultaneously and they spur each other on. And to a very large extent, the concerns and the issues around aging in our culture are aesthetic. The act of looking aged is not a disease. It's not nearly the problem that they want you to think it is. But the consistent exposure to that low-grade chronic inflammation is a problem because your immune system essentially gets stuck in the on position and it never really goes to. Have you ever heard about after the end of World War II, in some of the more remote islands in the Pacific Ocean, Japanese soldiers didn't believe that World War II was over, and they just kept fighting. They kept fighting people that lived on the island, they kept fighting each other, they kept fighting anybody that got close to the island. Like, one of them wasn't discovered, like they found him and figured out who he was and had to track down his old commanding officer who was like in his 90s and get a written letter in his handwriting because it was the only way that this guy would believe that the war was over and we lost and it's okay to go home. We'll give you a hero's welcome because of course it's so dishonorable to surrender that suicide is preferred. Like there's this whole thing. He was brought home in like 1978. Like, yeah, he lasted a really long time. He had a whole network of like tunnels and like you can go to that island and like tour his thing. And he gave tours for a while. So, but that's a low-grade inflammation. Like this one guy on this one island is not going to change the outcome of the war, but he's still there fighting. Your immune system is in there just poking, but it's never actually like getting the war over and done with. This is where inflammaging happens. When we talk about stress, I always quote Tammy Sweet, herbalist in Ithaca. She teaches about stress, and she says when we're constantly exposed to micro stressors, which, spoiler alert, is our normal lives. Our stress response is a constant low-level drag on ourselves. Our immune function is suboptimal, digestion is slow, sleep isn't great. When you're under large amounts of stress, these things shut down. But when you're under drippy stress, these things just like stumble and stutter along. Digestion doesn't really work great, but it's not stopped. The immune system's kind of like, it's not stopped. That's what we're talking about. When we have some sort of big event that causes stress, think of taking an exercise class or hearing something fall, right? When we have a big stress event and we manage to have a concrete end to that stressful event, like we end the exercise class and we drink water, or we go running into the other room and we see like a book on the floor, like nothing's broken. Oh, that relief, that ending of the stressful event feels really good. Having that sympathetic nervous system reaction, poof, and then be done with, that's healthy, that's normal. That constant low-level drag of chronic low-grade insidious stress keeps us in limbo between actually having an acute response that we can then recover from, and feeling fine. This low level drag is actually just dripping out stress chemicals. When we have that big event, we dump all of the stress chemicals, and then there's a resolution at the end and they shut off. We turn on the faucet, we turn off the faucet, like at the fire hydrant. This is a leaky sink, and it just never quits. And there's always just a little bit of dampness of stress hormones happening. This is the same lifestyle, this drippy stress that our ancestors might have experienced as seasonal lean times, like winter, where it's always just a little nerve-wracking because you don't know how bad it's going to get until the season's actually over. So when we're in that drippy stressed state, our bodies do things like prepare for winter, and they put on weight and they shut down brain function because it takes so much energy, and we experience brain fog and loss of that lean muscle, which we're already losing if we're after 40, according to the stats on your handouts. We sleep more, all things that would help us experience and survive a long winter. This dripping of stress hormones is damaging our cells. You've all experienced cutting open an apple and it turned brown. If you had tossed your apples in some lemon juice, they wouldn't have browned because the exposed apple cells were protected by the citric acid in the lemon juice. The process of the apple browning is oxidation, and that is the same process as fire and rust and electroplating and countless other chemical reactions that are called redox reactions. You don't really need to know that, but redox, R-E-D-O-X. In the body, protection from redox reactions, from the rusting of our cells. Protection happens with antioxidants. So when we're thinking about how everything impacts us as time passes in our lives, antioxidants are going to be super important. In contrast, a big stressful event dumps those stress chemicals in large enough amounts to reach a critical trigger point that shuts them off. So if you are in that routine of drippy stress and rusting of your body cells and your brain function, you can reach that critical point of shutting off the stress reaction with 45 minutes of activity that causes you to have difficulty talking at a challenge level. It's difficult to talk, not impossible. You don't want to be like completely winded, but walk fast enough that it's a little hard to have a conversation. Dance hard enough that you're sweating a little bit. Go garden, but make sure that you're a little winded. It's a little hard to like sing to yourself while you're doing it. As time goes on, our cells accumulate small bits of damage, even if we're not experiencing this drippy stress, which we all are. And these little bits of damage can make us more susceptible to health concerns like risks of falls and fractures and frailty, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and dementia. These are all things that come on slowly over years or even decades, because it's all an accumulation of little bits of damage. And yes, exercise is hugely important to prevent and in some cases reverse a lot of this. But there's also a lot of lifestyle and herbal things that are going to impact that damage. So one of them, do I have that list? Yes, there's our inflammaging slide. Just showing that before. Long-term, low-level, insidious chronic inflammation that keeps your immune system constantly fighting a losing battle from a lone island out in the Pacific somewhere. The stress response can either be the leaky faucet or just get under the waterfall. That does not look comfortable at all. Nope, not yet. We'll get there in a second. So the herbs, starting with phytoestrogens, plant-based estrogen sources. Are they good? Are they damaging? Are they frightening? Are they the best thing ever? There's no answer to that. Phytoestrogens are plant-based sources of weak estrogens. They have benefits like reducing breast cancer risks, reducing hypertension risks, heart disease, senility, and osteoporosis. The phytoestrogens weakly bind with our body's estrogen receptors. So as our bodies produce less estrogen over time, the phytoestrogens can step in and take some of that role. They are not recommended for women at risk of estrogen-dependent cancers. Some of the breast cancers, some of the other cancers are estrogen-dependent. So exposing yourself to phytoestrogens can spur their onset. We don't want that. But plants like soy, alfalfa, and red clover are often worked with to reduce bone loss because of their phytoestrogens. Nutritive herbs can also improve mineralization, like milky oats, green tea, horsetail, dandelion leaf, nettles, and beet greens. And you can ingest them with things like overnight infusions that you drink by the quart sizes. You can make soups and broths. You can make vinegar tinctures out of these things. And there's other nutrition considerations here. For protein, it's a little, there's a lot more specifics that can go into it, depending on age, depending on activity level, depending on gender. But in general, the minimum amount of protein that one needs to ingest to prevent getting sick is 0.36 grams, so a third of a gram per pound. And that means that a 150-pound person needs 54 grams of protein a day to not get sick from lack of protein. That is not a lot of protein. It's not very much at all. Calcium, you need 1,000 milligrams of calcium if you're between 50 and 70 years old, and 1,200 milligrams if you're over 70, because as age progresses, we're worse at absorbing that calcium. So having more available is going to be more better. 1 quart of an overnight infusion of nutritive herbs can provide, depending on the herbs, anywhere from 400 to 1,600 milligrams of calcium. A tablespoon of herbal vinegar can provide you with 50 to 100 milligrams. So I mentioned that Katie Bowman in the resources handout, she's all about stacking your movements, getting more movement out of the movements that you're already doing, out of the day that you're already having. You can also stack your supplements. So you need to be having quite a bit of fluid on a daily basis. If a quart or 3 of that is going to be a nourishing infusion, and you've made an herbal vinegar out of all of these nutritive herbs that are high in all of these minerals that you splash onto your food 3 or 4 times a day and maybe take a shot of in the night or whatever, you're getting those minerals slowly throughout the day instead of in one giant horse pill that you may or may not dissolve before it makes it out the other end of your digestive system. And it's part of your food. So there's digestion happening, which makes absorption more better and all this kind of stuff. There's also vitamin D to consider. You need vitamin D to deposit the calcium to make bone. 1 to 2,000 IU is your like normal, what you call it, supplementation level. And there's also collagen. This is a whole nother conversation. Per the Mayo Clinic, at least 30% of your body's protein content is made up of collagen. So 1/3 of your proteinous body is collagen protein. Collagen is made from 4 amino acids. I think there's 13 amino acids. 8 of them are essential, meaning we don't make them in our own body. We have to ingest them, the 8 essential amino acids. And then the rest of them we can synthesize. There's 4 that make up collagen: glycine, lysine, proline, and hydroxyproline. Those 4 amino acids make up at least 29 different kinds of collagen, because that's how many we've identified so far. So it's not just like a straightforward collagen. Oh no, there's buttercream frosting and cream cheese frosting and cocoa frost. Like there's all kinds of collagen, all kinds of frosting to hold everything together. But primarily we deal with 3 kinds of collagen. So if you go and look for collagen supplements in health food store, you're pretty much going to be faced with 3 Roman numerals: types 1, types 2, and type 3. There's more, you'll find types 5 and 7 and stuff. But types 1, 2, and 3 are the most common collagens that you're going to come across in your collagen supplements. The way to think about this is that types 1 and 3, you add that together, you get 4, and types 1 and 3 come from 4-legged animals. So we're talking about bones, ligaments, tendons, skin, blood vessels, internal organs for their elasticity and their strength. Primarily beef, pork, those like 36-hour pork broths at ramen joints where you could like stand a spoon up in the broth because it's so rich and thick. Those are going to be types 1 and 3 collagen sources. Type 2 collagen is found in 2-legged animals, which have significantly flimsier bones, right? Bird bones are very light and cartilaginous. Type 2 collagen is your cartilage. You're talking about your joint ends and your eyeballs and that kind of stuff. So you can get these 4 amino acids making up all of your collagen types in things like bone broth and unflavored gelatin and some dairy like Parmesan cheese, legumes like your lentils, delightful. Non-genetically modified soy products like tofu are going to have these amino acids. Spirulina, which is a blue-green algae, has these amino acids. And animal sources like red meat, poultry, pork, fish, and eggs are all going to have the amino acid that you need to make these 3 in specific 29-ish in general types of collagen. We need collagen to have both elasticity and strength in our bones, our ligaments, our tendons, skin, blood vessels, and internal organs. Elasticity and strength might seem like opposite from each other, things that can both stretch and be strong. But think of a tree in the wind. If it's brittle, it doesn't matter how strong it is. And if it's flexible, but it's not strong, it just bends over and stays there. We want to be able to adapt physically, and that's the collagen. In addition to those amino acids, we also need enough vitamin C, zinc, copper, and manganese for the collagen to form in the first place. So your green leafies and your root vegetables and your nuts and your seeds, eat good food, mostly plants, not too much. It's going to give you the minerals and the vitamins that you need so that that collagen forms in the first place. And if you're a seedy kind of person, hemp and pumpkin and cashews are all particularly good seeds. Cashew's not technically a seed. It's a weird thing. Cashews are really weird. Particularly good sources of these minerals as well. Also, collagen damage comes from excess sugar intake. I am very sorry about that. Smoking, sun exposure, ultraviolet light, and environmental pollutants. So when we look at putting plants in like our nourishing infusions, this slide is red beet greens and dandelion greens. This is all from nutritionvalue.org. So cup of cooked beet greens, 25% of your daily potassium, half of your vitamin A, a quarter of your Z2, 524% of your K, 26% of your daily magnesium. We like that. Dandelion greens you have divided into raw and cooked. So for example, in B2 fiber, no, never mind. So you can see everything is just about doubled when you cook the vitamin greens, or the vitamin greens, the dandelion greens. Twice as much fiber is available when you cook your dandelion greens. Twice the magnesium, more than twice the vitamin E. More than twice, I think, the vitamin K. That's a big number. Your vitamin C is a little bit higher, twice the B2. So raw isn't always better because your body has to do so much work to digest and extract from foods that cooking can actually make things more bioavailable. Sometimes it's better and sometimes it's not, but in terms of your dark leafy greens, cooking them is pretty helpful. You get more stuff out of them. So when we talk about bone density and how we lose bone density, our bone mineralization, there's 4 kinds of exercise. And all of them are important. None of them are more important than somebody else's. I like that picture. Resistance exercise is strength training. This is when you resist something. You resist gravity, you resist elastic, you resist weights. You're challenging your muscles. I like Pilates and I like bar for this. No, I don't like bar at all. It's horrible, but it's very effective. I taught bar for a while. I had to practice to be able to teach it for more than 10 minutes at a time, because after 10 minutes I fell down. It's really bad.
So I mean, you dancing out of
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, BARRE. Aerobic exercise is your endurance training. This is when you raise your heart rate and your respiration rates. Dance alone, garden, go hiking, sprint cleaning, which is my favorite. Set a timer for some like bizarro number, like 12 minutes, and see how much you can get clean, and then you're done. Like that's your reward, is then you're done. And if you didn't get it all, do it again tomorrow, or maybe later today. Balance training takes tiny muscles and adaptability. Balance is not a static point. You don't achieve balance and stay there. Balance, literally and metaphorically, is the ability to adapt to changing conditions. Have you ever watched somebody who's balanced, like those girls who do the handstands and then their feet come over and they draw back the bows and they fire with their toes and they're standing on their hands on sticks while they're doing it? They're shaking. They're not still. Balance is adaptability. It's not a distinct point. And then flexibility, also known as mobility. This is the ability to move, which is different than just being able to walk without falling down. One particular exercise that's really good with mobility is swimming. What we're really looking at are functional movements. You can stand there and bicep train all day long and get the bicep of Captain America, which is fine if you're in a superhero movie, but it's not going to be helpful and it's going to do funny things to your shoulder. The big functional movements make you strong in big functional ways. When you're getting off the couch and you step on a Lego, or when you forget that there's one more stair at the bottom of the staircase, or you open the fridge door and the pickle jar falls out. Those are the functional movements that we want to be able to adapt to. So that stacking of movement is making extra movements part of your day rather than having to exercise separately. So when you reach for something, get a balance exercise. Let a foot come off the ground and see how you're doing. When you're carrying groceries, Are you using the chest and the biceps and the back muscles? Or are you using the neck and the collarbone with those heavy grocery bags? Make it a strength training exercise when you do your things. We're going to talk about ways to stack your movements when we do the pelvic floor practices as well. When we use our muscles, there's a very cool chemical reaction that happens that causes the electrical changes in the muscle fibers that cause them to contract. So your brain says, curl the bicep. It takes electricity for that to happen, but it also takes chemistry. The muscle cells themselves pump calcium, that is, pump sodium and potassium through the cell membrane. And that charges the cell membrane and it goes zhoop. You need magnesium for it to go the other direction, which is why magnesium is very important. Take magnesium. This is positive, this is negative. There's chemical and electrical things happening, none of which the body likes, because positive and negative charges that are unfettered are oxidative damage. So your body uses calcium to buffer this. The calcium that is free floating in your blood is drawn to the site of muscle contractions, which is why full body strength training exercise is important for people at risk of or experiencing osteoporosis, so that you deposit calcium everywhere all the time as much as possible. Instead of just little strength training moves, those full body moves are depositing calcium in all the places. I had a Pilates client once who tore his rotator cuff, and when they reattached it, it's typically the bump is back here that like stuff gets attached to, but of course his had torn, so they moved it because it wasn't long enough anymore. And he developed this huge bone up here because he was a golfer. And that shoulder blade was very necessary for that golf swing. So he just kept depositing bone at that new attachment site because the body knew that it wasn't where it had been before. It was new, it was weak, and it didn't stay weak for long. It also stuck up out of his t-shirts and like made his jackets fit funny, but he didn't care because he had a great golf swing again. Your body puts calcium where your muscles contract. When we talk about different types of exercise, understand that we have 206 named bones in the body. But like those feet and hands are pretty complex. There's probably some stuff in there that we haven't really like named yet. 19 of those bones are in each of your feet. And that's going to come in handy when we talk about the pelvic floor stuff in a minute. Each foot has 19 individual bones. There are over 650 named skeletal muscles, meaning muscles that attach to our bones as compared to the muscles that make up our internal organs and the pupils of our eyes and that kind of stuff. The muscles that give us goosebumps are not skeletal muscles, but all the muscles that attach to our bones, 650 of them that we can be activating to deposit calcium on 206 different little bones in our bodies. It's a lot of opportunity to put the calcium back if we use it. Full body functional exercises are absolutely the best things that you can do. Walk, pickleball is a new favorite amongst a lot of people. Gardening, play with kids or play with pets, Tai Chi, reformer Pilates, yoga, hanging practice, hang on things. It's very hard. It's a good thing to try. And then the pelvic floor work that we're going to do here. Another piece to mention when we talk about this physical body is skin and skin damage from the sun. So there's a lot out there about sunscreen and cancer and sunburn and cancer. The best defense that we have against the damaging rays of the sun is a tan. but that only works if you tan. Some people just tan when they breathe. I had a Pilates client whose father's side of the family was Armenian, and she was always so embarrassed because she would be, I mean, in the winter time, she'd be just as pale as me. And by this time of year, she'd be so dark. And people thought she went tanning, like she was very embarrassed by this. Of all the things to be embarrassed about, sunburn is damaging to the DNA of your skin. It is a bad idea. UVA and UVB rays from the sun cause damage to the DNA of our skin. Melanin protects you by dissipating both UVA and UVB. And melanin makes vitamin D better than any vitamin D supplement that we can take. We need vitamin D for depositing calcium, for absorbing calcium. We need it for a good immune response. We also need it to repair what are called tight junctions in the gut. The gut lining is anywhere from 1 to 3 cells thick. So the junctions between the cells of the gut lining are very strong. They're called tight junctions. And vitamin D is an important factor for keeping them healthy and not torn apart by gut inflammation. When they are, it's called leaky gut. So vitamin D is important for that. We can't make vitamin D from the sun between October and March. We live north of Atlanta. That's the dividing line. So we either need to supplement or make a lot of vitamin D from March till October because we store it in our fat tissue and it gets released during the rest of the year. And we can supplement. So when we talk about sunscreen and we talk about sunburn and stuff, understand that the dogma of dermatology is that aging is a disease. The act of having wrinkles, the act of having aged skin is not a disease. It might still be something you wish to fight, and that's fine, but it's not an actual, medical problem. Skin cancer is. Melanin is protection, and having things like liver spots where your melanin production kind of freaks out in individual spaces is not a negative symptom of aging. There's also the fact that most malignant melanomas are found on parts of the body that have never been sunburned. So there's not direct evidence that sunburn causes malignant melanomas. There is a lot of danger with sunburn and DNA damage. So if you are the type to just burn and you don't ever get tan, sorry, you lose out on that particular defense. You don't get the melanin to help you disperse all of these UVA and UVB rays. If you have to progressively tan so that you don't burn, do that instead of going to the beach looking like I do. And spend a little bit of time outside gardening first and do it progressively. Sunscreen only blocks UVB rays. Sunscreen only blocks the UVB from the rays that cause wrinkles and sunburn. But it does not block UVA rays, which also penetrate the skin and cause DNA damage. Because it doesn't cause wrinkles, dermatology doesn't care. Now, sunblock will disperse UVA and UVB like the melanin will, but sunblock looks like zinc. It's literally reflecting those waves, those sun waves back away from you. Sunscreen can protect against basal cell and squamous cell carcinomas. So sunscreen and sunburn don't necessarily have anything to do with malignant melanomas, but sunscreen can protect from your basal cell and your squamous cell carcinomas. However, there's an argument about whether or not sunscreen itself causes cancer. And the research that's quoted denying that it doesn't cause cancer, proving that it does not cause cancer, is only done on unbroken skin. When sunscreen, the chemicals that are in sunscreen get into the deeper layers of your skin through a cut, through your skin becoming more permeable due to different medications or things that you've used topically. For example, alcohol makes your skin more permeable. So if you put on an alcohol-based remedy of any time, it's going to make your skin more permeable. Then that sunscreen can reach those deeper layers and be carcinogenic.
The sunscreen itself.
The sunscreen itself. So, yeah.
So there's more evidence for that than the basal cells causing cancer, is that one?
No, so sunscreen will protect from basal cell and squamous cell cancers.
Okay.
But if it gets into the deeper layers of your skin, it will cause other cancers.
Oh, I see.
Hats and long sleeves and progressive tanning are going to be much less chemically based defenses. Now, that's not to say I don't use the like a Cure spray on low chemical, not scary stuff when I go to the beach, because I turn into a cherry. Get the zinc on my nose. I've got the stick thing for like my nose and my chin, because I don't have to worry about my ears anymore. Than that, I don't have a ponytail, but you do. Tops of the ears and tops of the feet are the worst.
Oh God, so beautiful.
So
When I go to the beach, I wear like all lightweight pants and long sleeves, and people always like, "What's wrong with you?" I don't
I've never gotten my feet burned until I went out on the boat. And it was like,
yeah,
the reflection off the boat and the water. Oh my gosh.
one way to heal sunburn is your diluted vinegar. Really, really helpful. Some people use St. John's wort infused oil as an SPF. It has an SPF of about 8. So it does have a mild SPF factor, but an SPF of 10 only lets through 10%. No, it's the other way around. Yeah, an SPF of 10 lets through, it protects you from 90% of your UVA. A SPF of 20 protects you from 95% of your UVA. So like your SPFs of 80, like that's not really a 10. So even 10s and 20s are redirecting the UVAs. But to redirect the UVBs, which are also causing indirect DNA damage, you need your sun block. And that's pasty. That permeability of your skin can be due to photosensitivity from things like medications. Ibuprofen, Aleve, doxycycline, tetracycline, some birth controls, some high blood pressure medications, some antihistamines, some detergents, some citrus essential oils, and some cosmetics cause photosensitivity, which will give you burns at a much lower UVA, UVB rate than you would have otherwise expected. And that's damage. I'm sorry, St. John's wort has an SPF of 3. So SPF of 10 blocks 90% of your UVB. St. John's wort is an SPF of 3. Not terribly useful, but better than nothing. Some people use coconut oil. There's no evidence that it has an SPF, but it is so incredibly antioxidant that it's probably as a moisturizer just in there repairing all the damage before the damage is like becoming dangerous.
You used to put that on to tan.
Yeah. And look at your beautiful skin.
That's true.
Also, your red and orange vegetables, your lycopene and your beta carotene repair sun damage. So eat lots of carrots and lots of tomatoes and lots of bell peppers and like all the oranges and all the reds. And that's going to help with your skin damage as well. That's a whole lot of stuff. So then we switch gears and we talk a little bit about the movement part. Once I find that piece of paper. There you go.
Is there a lab they can do to check your melanin?
Melanin?
In your.
No, they'd have to do a
skin?
biopsy. And it changes depending on your exposure. So. No, it'd have to be like cut out and. Sliced up and microscopied.
Yeah,
No,
I don't burn, I was just asking.
yeah,
I mean, I don't block either.
You
Or
don't-
screen.
yeah.
I don't, please don't judge me. I don't put it.
We are,
on
this is
my
a
kid.
non-judgmental situation.
And I don't put it on my children either, they do not burn.
But,
But we are exposed to the sun throughout the year.
and if I could hazard a guess, you have an Italian heritage.
I'm Puerto Rican, my husband is Italian.
Yes,
so
I was guessing by the
maybe-
name, but yeah.
I mean, I've gotten like a red face, but. Maybe had a drink or two while in the sun.
Maybe that makes it. Yeah, whereas my family hails from Germany and Czechoslovakia. I could write a book on the sheets of skin that have peeled off of my shoulders and my back. Just big swaths of skin come off.
I won't like continue to burn, I'll just like have my like initial
Yeah,
seasonal burn.
yeah,
And like, you're like, ouch. But it's not,
Whoops.
unless you're at the beach, that's like really harsh, but like
Yeah.
working in the greenhouse, you just like. It's like pink burn and then you're done.
ideally, you would mitigate that initial burn by graduating that exposure.
Mhm.
So like actually with a timer, so like maybe give yourself 15 minutes
Right,
and then put a long sleeve shirt on.
right,
Ideally,
right.
because you're in the greenhouse, you're dying of heat.
No.
Yeah. I know. Or like a giant hat, like a giant hat, that kind of thing, like out to here, like a sombrero. That's what they make.
That's what some
they
of the ladies wear, yes.
Yeah. Or the, I don't know what they're called, but the Asian conical hats, because not only do they shade, but then they funnel the heat up and out. Like that's the whole point of the thing at the top is that airflow.
If you're in a greenhouse, nobody would think that would be odd.
No.
Wear
Oh,
something
no.
like that. They'd be like, oh, look at that,
It-
free.
Oh,
That'd be the least odd thing about it.
Right.
There's a lot of odd things.
So yeah, ideally, you do that gradual exposure so you don't ever actually have that first burn, because that burn is DNA damage, which is going to cause problems down the road. But, you know,
How far down the road?
there's no telling. There's so many other factors that can impact the speed of this. And if you're eating, you know, your oranges and your reds, you're maybe mitigating the damage that you've done. I just had one of those come to Jesus moments because Lauren put a thing on, she was videoing us in the class this morning, while we were out in the garden, and I cute outfit on, but I was wearing the apron from downstairs, which is not flattering. I look exactly like my grandmother.
Oh,
My Slovak grandmother, who was 4'10" high and 4'10" around, with the big glasses and the hair, and I was like, oh my god.
Genetics are strong.
Like, I know those are the genes I'm growing into, but I'm not ready.
Yeah.
So like, how far down the road? Not yet. So on the one hand, aging is not a disease, and on the other hand, not yet. Oh my god.
I have a question.
Yes.
Some people at my work actively tan, like go somewhere in like a tanning,
To a tanning
and
bed.
they claim like that is health, like the health of that. And I'm like in like the winter season, and I'm like, I guess some people might think that.
Yeah. well,
Is that a thing, or is that like?
I mean, on the one hand, yes, you're producing melanin when you're in a tanning bed.
Right,
But on the other hand, you're also at close proximity exposing yourself to high doses of A and B,
right,
UVA and UVB, and you're not making any vitamin D, and you're not necessarily using the coconut oil to moisturize its antioxidant and eating the oranges and the yellows and the reds because it's winter time. Like everything tastes like paste.
right.
Like fresh vegetables aren't like they are now.
Mhm.
No. they
Okay. No, I wasn't gonna do it, but I was always like, I mean, do you, but like,
Do you, but, exactly,
I was questioning that.
I don't like it,
Not recommended.
no,
No,
No, I've seen too many people die of basal cell cancer and, you know,
squamous,
squamous, thank you.
yeah,
You know, I had a patient who was a general in the Israeli army who, you know, fought in the desert for years, not necessarily getting burned, but
that,
he had squamous cell cancer all over his body.
can't imagine.
And it's true about melanoma. I've had patients who have melanoma on the roof of their mouth.
Right,
Like, how do you get, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
and died of that, you know, it just. But it's no joke,
yeah,
you know, and I mean, they really do say. You know, areas like with the squamous cell cancer, when you've been out in the sun, you get the actinic keratosis. I mean, I could show you some on me that I'm developing at 65. But, you know, that has a good chance at some point of developing into a sarcoma.
mm-hmm. It's scary.
And don't they say like it, I mean, I grew up in the age where when you were a teenager, went to prom, you laid in a tanning bed.
yeah.
So,
Right.
you know, like I did it. And they say like my risk of skin cancer is significantly higher now, just if I did it one time.
Right, because of
As
that,
I've damaged it so
that,
quickly.
yeah, so
Yeah.
quickly, that's the
Mhm.
piece, right? So it's that if you aren't an automatic tanner, then that gradual exposure is the important part, which we don't do.
I mean, they did teach you like, oh, go in for 5 minutes first time, 10 minutes, so you have, like.
But nobody
it's
does
still
it.
too quickly, it's still
Yeah.
good way, yeah.
Yeah.
Just now, I everyone sleeps at the beach.
Mom sleeps at the beach.
Yes,
Oh, right.
eat a lot of carrots.
And take an umbrella. When I was a kid, nobody had umbrellas on the beach. Like, they didn't make
Right.
umbrellas for the beach, and now I'm like, it's so bright. Couldn't had a beach umbrella, like, I don't understand, who were those people? My mom also bought us fluorescent bathing suits, me and my dad, so that she could find us, because we would go out there till we were purple. So I wasn't getting a lot of sunburn because I was up to my neck in water. My dad was 6 foot tall, so he was like, you know, up to his chest. Oh my God, but they've also done photographic studies of long haul truck drivers, and especially in the US. Although I'm assuming it's the same but opposite in the UK. The left side of their face is leathery and just unbelievable, and the right side is not because of the light coming in. That doesn't mean that left side of the face gets the cancer. It can show up all over the place. We're doing DNA damage all over the place, not just at the site of the burn. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong with it. But hiding from the sun gives you a vitamin D deficiency.
Definitely have that.
A vitamin D deficiency and a proclivity to burn when you do have to go out in it. So balance, all things in moderation, including moderation. You know.
Nice. But that is true, my dermatologist, because my skin is so sensitive, she does recommend that I wear sunblock and sunscreen when I drive.
Yeah.
Because I drive like long distances sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and if you have the window down, you don't have that protection through your window.
yeah.
It's different. Yeah, I could burn just driving 4 hours somewhere if my window's down.
I took a drive a couple of Augusts ago well, I had a Pilates client who was moving to South Carolina. So she doesn't fly. And they had 2 cars. And she doesn't drive distances. So they paid me to drive a really spiffy Volvo sedan, which has adaptive cruise control. So it slows you down when you get behind people.
Mhm.
I drove 95, not miles an hour, Route 95, without touching the gas.
Yeah.
My feet didn't hurt, like it was glorious. I drove all the way down to Florida to see my parents and then back up to their place in Hilton Head. That's what it does. And I had to put a shirt in the window because I drove in August and I went south. And even going south, the sun was just murder coming through that window. So you can get those little stick-on shade things. Like if you've got kids, pay attention to how much they're getting in their faces because they're not necessarily paying attention and like turning away or anything. And the whole thing. So do we have any other questions about bone density, nutrition, skin, that kind of stuff. We're gonna pivot then to the other half and the pelvic floor goodness. So before we do any of the practices, which are all on video, I'm gonna keep the video running for this part to tell you a little bit about why we're going at it from the feet up. So you'll notice on your handouts, this is all, they're all titled The Foot to Forehead Fix, because this is a program that I put together on COVID. That's just, I just didn't take the title off of all the stuff for our thing. So we've got a couple of different pieces here. In our private website are some documents that we can download. One of them is the important bony markers. So that is where Elvis the pelvis is going to come in handy. Knowing where all the things are that I'm talking about in the first place is going to be really important. One of them is your foot, right? You stuck a foot in poor Edie's face. Toe pads are directly opposite your toenails. Balls of the toes are where they bend at the foot. I know how to move my foot without moving my ankle. So the toe balls are where everything bends. And then we've got the heel pad versus the heel curve. The arch on the inside here, you might be shocked to learn, is not bony. There is no arch-shaped bone in your foot. The arch of your foot is determined by the strength and the lack thereof of your outer hips. You can change the shape of your foot arch by improving the strength of your hips. We'll get to that. We've got cavities in our torso. The thoracic cavity is your rib cage. It's the top third. The abdominal cavity is the squishy part where there aren't any bones in the middle. And then the pelvic cavity is the bottom third. It's everything from the tailbone to the belly button, basically. And then in the actual pelvis, we're going to talk about the hip points. If you've ever seen that airplane game that kids will play where you lay on your back and put your arms and legs up and somebody then rests their hips on the feet and takes hold of your hands, the feet go on the hip points. This is what we're talking about. These guys right here, they're very important. The other one is the pubic symphysis. This is a giant piece of cartilage that connects the left half of your pelvis to the right half of your pelvis. When we're standing, we're going to find that pubic symphysis, but you're not going to mess around with it too much because it'll hurt. It gets sore. It moves and it shouldn't move that much. So don't like jam in there with your fingers. It's going to hurt. Don't do that. It's also, so these are the three basic hip markers, the pelvis markers, 2 hip points and a pubic symphysis. It's also really helpful to understand while we're thinking about it, is that when we look at the back of the pelvis, the only thing that moves is that tailbone. This whole thing is fused together and immobile, but that little tiny tailbone down there moves. That's going to be super important when we're talking about the pelvic floor. I'll tell you more in a second. We also have the equipment list, which for today, all we needed was a rolled up bath towel. We're going to need straight edges. So you're going to bring a couple of pieces of paper downstairs with you, probably your handouts, but you know, it could be random paper, I don't care. And these are primarily for you practicing at home. So for example, to practice this over the course of the next month, you're going to need enough space to take a few steps side to side, that kind of thing. Another one of them is the body breakthrough bingo sheets. The bingo sheets.
I think I love these.
These are printouts from what's on the website.
Oh, okay.
These are in full color. I don't have a color printer.
They were sent in an email.
Yeah,
I didn't print them yet.
that's fine. You don't have to. You don't have to at all if you don't want to. But if you want to play bingo and you want to write on it, this has stuff like being able to do the top of the foot stretch, which you're going to learn today without your foot cramping.
Yeah, I
Or
read that and was like, Ow.
There's, which was the other one? Have a dry sneeze. Maybe that's already a thing you do. Check it off. Maybe it's not. Put your socks on while you're standing up. It's a balance challenge. So this is your bingo sheet. Also in the documents on the website is our neutral spine fun sheet. Because I think this is fun stuff. This is more for the second session. It's about how we sit, but it's gonna start, give you something to start thinking about. Plus, you get exposed to more of my stick figures. I put a lot of work into these stick figures. So we're approaching the pelvic floor stuff from the feet. Up to 80% of women will have pelvic floor dysfunction at some point in their lives. What's stacked on top of the pelvic floor and hangs from underneath the pelvic floor has a direct impact. When we're talking about your pelvis, let me make sure that you can see this. Your pelvic floor is everything that keeps everything in here from falling out the bottom. So it's a collection of muscles in here that act like one of those doors, like on a spaceship, right? Then it's fine, it's an open door, and then it closes up and it's not open anymore. You know what I mean? Big doors. So everything that's pushing on your pelvis from in here, digestive organs, reproductive organs, everything that's stacked on the torso above the pelvis, everything that's hanging from the pelvis underneath it, legs and feet and all that kind of stuff, it all impacts this center point in your body. So we start at the very bottom and work our way up so that it all functions as appropriately as we can get it to. We're going to talk about rib placement. We're going to talk about pelvic positioning, foot mechanics, having a good relationship between the hamstrings and the quads, and the hamstrings and the glutes, which we probably don't at the moment, and that's fine. We're going to talk about function and dysfunction. So in muscles, a functional muscle is flexible. It's long and it's supple, and at rest, it's taut. This is not functional. This is because I have stopped teaching Pilates and I haven't picked anything else up since then. So my triceps have gone, I don't bake bread, so there's no tricep happening. Get on it. You want your muscles to hold up your organs, and this is your pelvic floor muscles, to hold up your organs and to have the motor skills required to open and close your bathroom muscles. Pelvic floor moves. It's not just a trampoline sitting at the bottom of your pelvis with tension pushing down on it. It moves, it has motor skills. Dysfunctional muscles are weak, and in that they might be tight or they might be loose. Weak muscles that have no demand placed on them are loose. Weak muscles that are holding things up structurally are tight because they're hanging on for dear life. Most of the time, a tight muscle is a weak muscle. And most of the time, pelvic floor dysfunction is because the pelvic floor muscles are weak and tight. So trying to do something like a Kegel, which is shortening a muscle against a muscle that's already tight, that's already short, is not going to be useful. We're going to learn how to get flexibility and length out of that pelvic floor so that it has somewhere to contract from, so that it has normal ranges of movement. When we're talking about dysfunctional pelvic muscles, we're looking at things like incontinence, prolapse of the pelvic organs and of the eliminatory organs, and anus can prolapse, so men can have pelvic floor dysfunctions too. In the female pelvis, there are 3 exits, and in the male pelvis, there are 2. A lot of male pelvic floor issues are there's a word, basically non-cancerous prostate issues. Because the weight of everything above that pelvis is sitting on the prostate gland and it's being irritated constantly. And so it swells from that irritation. So a lot of clinical, non-cancerous prostate issues can be fixed with pelvic positioning. All of the muscles in your body have a desired length and strength and resting tension. And this is why we're doing this program over the course of 4 months, because it takes time to reestablish those normal patterns for those muscles. We can't just simply train them. Muscles can be strengthened and they can be stretched, but they also can be released when they're just hanging on. It takes practice to let them go, which is different than a stretch. A stretch is when you take them past their normal. And as an engagement, a strengthen is when you bring them into, right? We've got stretch and we've got strengthen, but a release just lets it go in the first place. So it finds a resting middle that isn't that engaged strength position. We're going to talk a lot about the chains in the body, front chains and back chains, because everything hooks together. It's pointless to try to strengthen a muscle that's in a tightened state. So a lot of what's going to be going on in our bodies is that the front chain is overengaged and the back chain is underengaged. And we need to swap that tension out in the body so that we can then start strengthening the things that need to be strengthened. Sometimes, let's see, don't want to say any of that today. So do Kegels work? Yes and no. There's no easy answers. Kegels will reduce pelvic floor dysfunction symptoms in the short term. It can spot reduce those symptoms. But optimal function of the pelvis takes work above and below, north and south of the pelvis before you actually get into the pelvis itself. When should you work with Kegels? When you have no continence issues, when you have no sensation in the pelvic floor. You can use Kegels to build the nerve endings so that you have sensation of what's going on in there. And when there's no brain to muscle connection, when you're not able to engage that pelvic floor, that don't pee squeeze, just by thinking about it, we practice it to build that neuromuscular connection because there's a neurological problem. But it's not good practice to shorten the pelvic floor muscles with a Kegel when they're already short. That's not what we're going after today. So that's not what we're going to be doing in this class at all. We're not doing any Kegels. If there's a neurological problem, if you don't have sensation, if you don't have that ability to contract on command, then you're going to want to talk to a pelvic floor personal trainer or physical therapist. You're going to want to go to a women's health physical therapist to get more hands-on and invasive pelvic floor work. You get in there, there's gloves involved. So while I got Elvis out, we've got this whole mess of muscles down here that's holding everything up so it doesn't fall out the bottom. This doesn't really move. This doesn't really move. This moves in a bunch of ways. But all of the tape marks on Elvis are places where muscles attach. This is your gluteus minimus. This is your psoas major. No, this is the iliacus. Psoas major attaches 1, 2, 3, 4, right about here. So your iliacus and your psoas major should come down to form your psoas muscle right about here. You've got all kinds of muscles up here. You've got all kinds of muscles, all kinds of places for muscles to contract. To get length out of the pelvic floor, while it's in a circle down here holding on to things that don't move, what we're going to be trying to do is moving that tailbone away from the pubic symphysis. So this way that I'm sitting right now, that's still very, very comfortable, is squashing that tailbone towards the pubic symphysis. we're gonna be working on all kinds of positioning patterns that do other things, but also move that tailbone backwards.
Do you find that position comfortable?
For the time being, my butt's going to
Sitting on the
sleep.
floor.
Well, get a chair,
I need to
Shannon.
stand right now, because I was squirming, I was so comfortable sitting there.
You're perfectly fine. Don't forget, I'm sitting here running my face, so I'm distracted. But yeah, the feet are starting to fall asleep down here where they're pushing and my butt's falling asleep on the left side. It's not ideal. So that's really what we're gonna be talking about, is moving that tailbone away. That's where the length is coming from. There's other pieces of strengthening and engagement that's gonna help us maintain that. At the end of the day, it's moving the tailbone away from that pubic symphysis to gain space. That's the pelvic floor motor skills that we're after. All right, P&T break. And then from here on out, everything else will be replicated in the video that I have linked on our webpage thingy over.
I thought that when I checked the email, she talked about linking us to it, but I think she forgot to include the email, the link in the email. But does everybody, or is it zero?
So you have the printouts.
Yes,
That's the website.
no,
There was a website to make
There's
her
a
video.
website.
Yeah.
there was a website, because the,
I was on
That's-
my phone, I clicked on it, I
Oh.
went to,
I didn't have, because these were PFPs that were attached to the email.
Yeah, but on one of them, there's a link, I think.
Is there, I'll go
Yeah.
back and recheck.
I'll
Let's see.
resend the link as well.
I think
It's
the link is in the main, like, paragraph of the
Okay, I
email,
didn't see
Of the
that.
and then
email.
the documents are attached. So you can just print them from that email if you want.
so impressed. I'm like, I'm blown away that the documents are attached. I didn't think, oh well. Yeah, okay. We'll come back. Oh, and the last piece is that cootie catcher. So what's gonna happen is over the course of the month, I'm gonna send out some like random emails and be like, hey, it's time to catch a cootie. And I'm gonna give you a couple of prompts for the numbers and the thingies. And when you open up that cootie catcher, where did I put it? Right here. So it's gonna, how do you fold yours? Yeah, Marcia's gonna have to teach us how to do this. When you open, it's head, shoulders, knees, and toes are the outside. And then the inside is a couple of numbers, 1 through 8. And then when you open up your thing, it's gonna give you a practice. And that's gonna be a practice you're gonna just jump into. So throughout the day, I'd like you to be practicing the things that you're gonna learn, but also extras. And there's cute little quotes in there and stuff too.
That's an idea. Reminds me of a little how open it up.
Yes, I would like to stop. Thank you.